On May 26, 2014, two Los Angeles police officers brutally murdered a man in Long Beach after one policeman shot the other by accident. Officers Jose Ruiz and Albert Murade chased down 23-year-old Noel Aguiar for riding his bicycle with headphones and refusing to stop when called for. Video footage shows the accidental shooting of Murade by Ruiz as they attempt to hold Aguiar to the ground. In retaliation to the mistake, Ruiz then blames Aguiar for the shooting, right before Murade unloads 3 more shots into the suspect's body at close range. The case was shelved for almost an entire year as the officers in question covered up the truth, but video footage of the killing finally leaked onto the internet, and a new investigation has gone underway. An unarmed, handcuffed, and inebriated woman found herself at the mercy of a violent police officer who abandoned procedure in Shreveport, Louisiana in 2008. Angela Garbarino was accosted by Officer Wiley Willis after being arrested for public intoxication. While in the booking room of the police station, Garbarino, intent on making a phone call, attempted to leave the room before being handcuffed and sat down in a nearby chair. Moments later, Willis flips off the security camera recording the events taking place in the room. When the recording continues, Garbarino is seen lying in a pool of her own blood, her eyes black and swollen, and unable to move or speak. Willis sits above her, refusing to administer any kind of medical attention, implicating him in the attack. Other officers finally bring in a stretcher, and Garbarino is taken to a hospital. While Willis was fired from his position, he was eventually reinstated a year later after settling the matter with Garbarino out of court. He was never legally charged with any wrongdoing. As Seattle resident Christopher Harris walked by a movie theater in 2009, he was suddenly rushed and thrown into a wall by Sheriff's Deputy Matthew Paul with such tremendous force it left the 29-year-old man in a severe coma. Paul had mistaken Harris for a robbery suspect. Despite the life-altering injuries Harris sustained, Paul was not charged with any misconduct, and the police department provided a statement saying that he had done nothing wrong. Unsurprisingly, Paul had a history of thoughtless attacks in both police training sessions and in regard to civilian arrests. Months earlier, a man named Jeff Gold provided photographic evidence of injuries he sustained after being taken down by Paul for obstructing an officer. Though Gold was not formally charged with any crime, Paul stayed with the police department after the Christopher Harris incident. About 6 years later, the man eventually passed away due to the catastrophic brain injury. The tragic and well-documented killing of Oscar Grant went on to not only inspire riots and protests, but even became a popular award-winning film with Fruitvale Station. After BART police responded to a physical altercation call on the West Oakland station, they came into contact with Grant and his friends, pulling them off the train and questioning them. When Grant learned he was going to be arrested, he protested, only to be thrown to the ground face first and pinned down. He was not checked to see if he was carrying a weapon. As one officer hurled a racial epithet at Grant, a train passenger began to film the event. Grant begged not to be tased as an officer placed his knee down on the young man's neck. Finally, without provocation, Officer Johannes Messerle fired a single shot into the 22-year-old's back. Grant died the next day. Riots and protests filled California streets in the following days, and Messerle was eventually charged and sentenced for murder. Arguably the most altering police brutality case in American history is that of the beating of Rodney King. After a high-speed police chase, King was ordered out of his vehicle and forced to the ground by a taser from one police officer. After a struggle, King is repeatedly bashed and beaten by the batons of 4 police officers, all of whom opt to continuously attack the man instead of arresting him. King eventually props up to his knees, only to be attacked viciously again and again. In all, King was hit over 40 times over the course of nearly 2 minutes. The footage of his beating came into view of the public 2 days after the incident and ignited a storm of riots and protests that burned down and destroyed millions of dollars in public and private property. To this day, the King beatings present a warning to officers. No amount of power puts you above the law.